you're buying an apartment in New York City, you're probably wondering what as is really means. Well, let's talk about it. Hi, my name is John Moss. I'm a partner at Moss & Moss LLP. We're a full-service law firm in the heart of Flatiron District, and let's dig in. So, as is in a contract, in a real estate contract, what does that really mean? Well, the condition of the apartment, whether it's a condo, a co-op, what it may be, is intended to be the same condition at closing as it is when we went into contract, when you actually sign the contract, except that the plumbing, electric, HVAC, and the appliances all need to be in working order at time of closing, provided that they are under the control of the seller. So let's dig into that a little bit. Certain things are owned by the building under the building's ownership and control. That is the plumbing, the electric, the HVAC. These things are inside the walls. They're not physically owned by the seller. And that applies to both co-ops and condos, generally speaking. Appliances, on the other hand, typically fall within the control of the seller. And so we do want to have those in working order at time of closing. The contract itself is going to govern this a little bit as well. The standard contract does provide for this working order. But your attorney is probably going to have a little bit of a rider, is going to have some additional language that specifies certain things. For example, typically we're going to say that any damage to the walls and the floors has to be corrected provided that it's larger than a US dime and cannot be just covered up with spackle and paint. Now, sellers aren't obligated to repaint the apartment. You're not going to get it perfectly clean, but the apartment is going to be in good condition. It's going to be quote-unquote broom swept. So what does that mean? It means that if you go in with a white glove, you're still going to see some dirt. You're still going to see some dust. There's still going to be, it's worn, it's used, normal wear and tear. But again, everything is going to be functional. So as I say to many clients, if somebody takes a poster off the wall, there's a pinhole in the wall, that's tolerable. Chances are the buyer's going to go in and repaint the apartment, and those will get covered up. On the other hand, if a seller takes down a mounted television set, for example, and it leaves a hole the size of my fist, then the seller needs to take care of it. Thing is, more often than not, the seller will provide a credit at closing to the buyer to address these issues. So, for example, if there is a television that's taken off the wall, chances are the seller's not going to go in with spackle himself, but he's going to say to the buyer, hey, look, you're going to repaint, you're going to get a professional crew in. How much is it going to cost for them to take care of putting up spackling over this hole? $100? Great. Here's $100. Let's move on with our lives. Similarly, with regard to the appliances, working order does not mean brand new. I mean, the thing is, the apartment's lived in. The appliances are going to be used. So the idea isn't that they're sparkling clean and they're just installed. They are in the used condition that they're in. Again, same condition as we went into contract, same deal. That being said, you're going to do a final walkthrough, final inspection of the apartment with your broker right before the closing, whether it's the night before, the morning of, or maybe a day or two prior. And that inspection, you're going to really examine the apartment, you're going to examine the condition of the apartment, and your broker is going to lead you through that process. So, you're not the one that has to know to flush the toilet or check behind the drapes or what have you. Your broker will help you out. And you'll you'll flip the switches on the light fixtures, you'll check the burners on the stove, you'll flush the toilets. And if there is something that's not in working order, again, let's say the burner on one of the burners on the stove isn't working. Okay, we're not necessarily going to have the super come up and fix it, but when we do get to closing, chances are the conversation will go something like this. What kind of a stove is it? It's a Wolf stove. Okay, how much does the repairman cost to get in there? Let's say $500. Great. Here's a credit for $500. Let's close. Okay, fine. The idea is that we keep the momentum going and that hopefully both parties will be reasonable and resolve it easily and simply. You don't want to get into a situation where people are arguing about, $100 credit when the apartment is $5 million. I mean, at a certain point, everyone has to be reasonable, but Again, the thing is that you're not buying truly a new apartment. And even if you are, it's not necessarily going to be perfect. It's, again, this broom swept concept. With new construction, it's a slightly different scenario. So if you're buying an apartment from a sponsor or developer, the concept is that when you close, the apartment will be mostly complete. When I say mostly, I mean 97, 98%. There might be like one or two minor things that need to be done. For example, a door handle might be loose, or there might be a loose handle on the sink in the bathroom, or there might be a couple of missing pulls on the cabinet doors. These are all within the realm of acceptability, and it doesn't impact the livability, the habitability of the apartment. And in this case, what you'll do is you'll do a pre-closing walkthrough with the brokers, and you'll develop what's called a punch list. And that is to say, these are specific line items that need to be corrected after closing. There's typically, in a new construction contract, there is actually a provision for that in the contract. There's an attachment to the contract that shows you the punch list items, and it's fairly common to do that. The sponsor will correct those items post-closing. You can talk to your attorney about making sure those are done within a certain period of time. That's just part of the negotiation. But that being said, the apartment will be livable and will be in habitable condition prior to closing. So let's talk a little bit about a few examples. What happens if the windows aren't balanced or they're not working properly? Well, this is going to depend in large part on the specific language of the contract itself and also how the building handles windows. Most condos, windows are the responsibility of the unit owners. So if the window is not properly balanced, it won't stay up, for example, when you leave it. That's something that the seller and the purchaser have to deal with. However, if it is a pre-existing condition, if it's a condition that exists prior to going to contract, it's not necessarily something that the seller would have to fix before you close. Your attorney can put in a provision in the document that says, hey, seller needs to make sure that all the windows and doors are in perfect working order. But again, that's a point of negotiation between the parties prior to closing. So that being said, if you close and the window doesn't quite sit properly, unfortunately, that's something that you're going to have to deal with the building on your own. Another example is what happens if the HVAC isn't in proper working order. Now, again, if this is something under the seller's control, this is something that needs to be handled prior to closing. But if the HVAC, if it's central air, for example, or if there are units that are controlled by the condominium association, then that's something that the seller it's outside of their control. It's not something they're responsible to fix prior to closing. Typically, the seller will call the condo association, they'll call the super and say, hey man, come up and fix this thing. But it's not their responsibility to make sure it's completed prior to closing, again, unless it's specified in the contract. One other question. What if the seller's broker says this apartment is as is, perfectly, it's as is, there's no changes, no nothing? Well, again, this comes back to the standard language in the contract which governs. And that standard language says that the condition of the apartment is as is except for these items have to be in working order. A seller can contract around this and say explicitly that as is means truly as is, but that's very unusual. That's really quite rare. And for your part as the buyer, if the seller is vehement or the seller's agent is vehement that it has to be as is, that doesn't change the fact that you can always negotiate. You or your broker can always go back to the sponsor, so the seller's broker, and say, hey, look, that's all well and good, but I still want to have this, and this fixed. Or alternatively, I don't know what the condition of everything in the apartment is, so I want a slight credit to address things that might come up. It's all about negotiation, and at the end of the day, it's also all about net numbers. You really want to make sure that when you close, when all's said and done, you're within your budget. And if that means you've got a couple of bucks, you've got a credit here and a credit here and a credit here, great, however that works for you. But keep your eye on the long term, keep your eye on the total purchase price, and that'll lead you to a successful closing. I hope you've enjoyed this video and we've answered all your questions. If you do have any additional questions, you can leave a comment below. And if you have any legal needs, our contact information is attached. Thanks so much and have a great day.